Now on BBC One, Clive Myrie with the BBC News at 10.
Tonight at 10, the United Nations is warning of an escalating humanitarian disaster in Sudan. This, the scene over the broken capital Khartoum as fighting continues despite pledges to honour a ceasefire. Thousands relieve they've made it to safety, leaving behind a catastrophe.
In a few days, it's going to be really bad because there is nothing to eat. There is no water, there is no electricity. It's really damaged.
The Foreign Office says more British nationals have been airlifted out this evening, but further flights aren't expected. Also tonight, the latest strike by thousands of nurses in England over pay ends shortly, the most wide-ranging stoppage so far. Violence erupts across France in May Day protests over President Macron's pension reforms. And it's a nail-biter at the World Snooker Championships as Britain's Mark Selby battles back against Belgium's Luca Bressel. Good evening. The United Nations is warning of an escalating humanitarian disaster in Sudan, saying the situation is reaching breaking point. It's sending its top aid official to the region to help coordinate relief efforts. Fighting has continued in the capital Khartoum, with black smoke rising high above the city despite promises of an extension to the current ceasefire by the warring military factions. While efforts to evacuate foreign nationals are continuing, with thousands trying to escape to neighbouring countries, including Egypt to the north and Chad in the west. Extra UK evacuation flights flow out today. The Foreign Office says it's now moved well over 2,000 people to safety. Others trying to escape are leaving via Port Sudan in ships heading to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, from where our Africa correspondent Andrew Harding has sent us the very latest.
On Sudan's coast, the scramble to escape goes on. Foreign nationals register for a boat ride to safety. This morning, some 300 of them arrived here in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, having crossed the Red Sea from Port Sudan. All sorts of embassies on hand to claim their own. Several British families were on board, having made their own way to Sudan's coast, each with grim stories.
It was scary, terrifying.
There's a few shells that hit the house.
Your own house?
Yes, on the roof of the house. A few neighbours, a girl, she was 16 years old, broke bullet in the house, killed her.
Killed her?
Yeah.
I left behind my family, and I don't want to. I really don't want to go. But my husband, my kids, in the U.S. In a few days, it's going to be really bad because there is nothing to eat. There is no water, there is no electricity. It's really damaged.
These foreign evacuations are happening more regularly now. Indeed, some countries, like Britain, are already starting to wind their operations down. But the conflict that triggered all this rages on. Sudan's two warring generals, despite agreeing to yet another ceasefire, seem determined to settle this militarily.
The proof of that, black smoke still rising today from the banks of the River Nile, Sudan's capital, Khartoum, under heavy bombardment. On the streets, the paramilitary RSF brandish their weapons, vowing to fight on. And new footage of their enemy too, Sudan's top brass, the army commander presiding, grim-faced. Outside, food queues for the millions still stuck in Khartoum. A global relief operation has barely begun to address the humanitarian crisis growing here and across Sudan. This is one of Africa's biggest countries, but it's now at risk of total collapse. These families already fleeing west across the border into neighbouring Chad, and the UN warning today that hundreds of thousands could soon follow suit. Andrew Harding, BBC News.
Well, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet, is in Jeddah for us. Lise, the sense of relief for the thousands of people who've managed to make it to where you are, that must be so powerful.
Clive, you feel it, you see it, not just the relief, but the utter exhaustion and also the trauma. But it's more than that. You also feel the sadness. It's been so striking that we hear from both foreigners as well as Sudanese lucky enough to have second passports, how sad and fearful they are about the Sudanese, the friends and family they had to leave behind. And yet so many more will have no choice but to go in whatever direction, across whatever border, into whatever country will take them. One UN official is saying the exodus could reach 800,000. Others say it will be millions. And yet we still hear from Sudanese, even those hiding in their homes, to the sound of bullets and bombs, some of them even striking their homes. They don't want to go. They don't want to lose their homes, their history going back centuries. They don't want to lose their country and their sense of self.
Truly dreadful. Okay, Lise, thank you. Lise Doucet there, live in Jeddah. The 28-day strike by thousands of nurses in England is due to finish at midnight, bringing to an end their most wide-ranging stoppage so far in the dispute over pay. It's the first time Royal College of Nursing intensive care staff have taken industrial action. Now, the strike has affected more than half of hospitals in England, though there was a guaranteed minimum level of cover for intensive care and trauma units. Around a quarter of the trusts involved were given extra exemptions for services such as transplant and cardiac care. Tomorrow, there'll be a meeting of other health unions to discuss the government's pay offer, which the Health Secretary says is fair and reasonable. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson has more details.
They say cut back, we say fight back.
Nurses on the picket line once again.
No NHS cuts.
Determined to have their voices heard in this dispute over pay and conditions.
I've been a nurse now for 15 years and it's just got worse and worse. The staffing is cut, our pay is cut, but our patient care is always excellent. But we just strive and we give and we get nothing back.
We're on strike because I have seen over my entire career of more than a decade in the NHS a progressive decline in the quality of care that me and my colleagues have been able to provide.
Today's industrial action by the Royal College of Nursing went further and deeper than their previous strikes this year.
We'll be there to care for you.
Although minimum safe cover was guaranteed, half of all trusts in England were affected and all of their services had at least some nurses walk out.
This is the nurses' most significant strike yet, an indication, they say, of their profound discontent. But the Royal College of Nursing's mandate to strike runs out at midnight tonight, and there is a question about how much appetite there is for more industrial action.
There will be a ballot mid-May of our members, and that will close mid-June. And if we are successful in that ballot, unfortunately, and if the Secretary of State refuses to listen to these brilliant nurses, we will be finding ourselves on picket lines right up to Christmas. That's not a good look for any government to keep their nursing staff on picket lines for now a year.
But will that happen? Today's strike by the RCN came after they rejected a government offer of a 5% pay rise for this year and a one-off payment to top up last year's salary. Members of the Unite union have also rejected the deal and were striking today. But other unions representing ambulance staff, midwives and physios have accepted the offer, and it looks as though they're in the majority.
We will now get together on Tuesday. The NHS Staff Council will meet to vote on whether it accepts the agreement that we negotiated with them. I think it's right to wait for the NHS Staff Council to come to that decision, and I think this strike is premature and is disrespectful to those trade unions that will be meeting on Tuesday.
If a majority of unions do agree to the deal, the government has said it will introduce it for all, including the nurses, no doubt in the hope of preventing future strikes. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
In France, more than 100 police officers have been injured and nearly 300 people arrested after traditional May Day rallies nationwide turned into protests against President Macron's pension reforms. Police were involved in clashes in several cities and fired tear gas and water cannon in Paris. From the capital, our Europe correspondent Nick Beake has more.
The May Day March, a French tradition reaching back decades, but fueling this year's protest, fury over raising the pension age. Grandmother Clara told us she'd keep on fighting against the new law.
I think it's possible to win. I'm here to win. I'm here to win.
Within minutes, the soundtrack of the city changed. Violent clashes with some of the 5,000 police on patrol. One officer suffered serious burns after this attack. A nearby building was then torched.
This pension reform may have already gone through, but still, people are extremely angry. Yes, this is the hardcore element, but it reflects a wider anger of the French people.
This was the western city of Nantes, where a minority also broke away from official union protests. In Lyon too, police were on the back foot, although they made more than 300 arrests across the country. A cloud now hangs over President Macron's second term in office after his bypassing of Parliament to force through his signature pension policy. But no sign any of this will make him change course. Nick Beake, BBC News, Paris.
Another major American bank has gone bust, the third this year. First Republic is now being taken over by the investment giant JP Morgan Chase. The deal is expected to cost the US government's insurance fund around $13 billion. Samira Hussain has more from New York.
As of Monday, First Republic customers turning up at their bank are in fact customers of JP Morgan Chase. The signs above will soon change. First Republic had been under pressure since the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank 2 months earlier. Last week, First Republic revealed depositors had withdrawn $100 billion in the space of a few months. Customers feared their money was not safe. Investors became convinced it was about to fail. Riding to the rescue of America's distressed financial system, the boss of America's biggest bank, Jamie Dimon. He says the turbulence in the banks is nearly over.
And so this is getting near the end of it, and hopefully this helps stabilize everything. I think you've seen all the regional banks report. They actually had some pretty good results. The American banking system is extraordinarily sound.
First Republic is the biggest U.S. bank failure since 2008. It invariably brings back memories of the collapse of Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and the global financial crisis that followed. Industry experts say the causes this time are very different.
It's about two things. It's about the speed with which interest rates had to be hiked and the monetary excess which really preceded it, which is quite different to what happened in, say, 2007.
For the Biden administration, the 11th hour rescue package is a win.
All depositors are protected and the taxpayers are not on the hook. These actions are going to make sure that the banking system is safe and sound, and that includes protecting small businesses across the country.
Despite assurances that the banking system in the United States is safe, 3 lenders have failed in less than 2 months. And as the U.S. economy seems to teeter towards a slowdown, there are fears here on Wall Street that more banks could fail. Samira Hussain, BBC News, New York.
Local elections are being held this Thursday in parts of England and later this month in Northern Ireland. Our deputy political editor, Vicky Young, has analysis on what's in store.
In the coming days and weeks, local elections will be held in parts of the UK. On the 4th of May in England, more than 8,000 seats will be contested in these 230 councils, most of them district. And on the 18th of May in Northern Ireland, 11 council elections will be held. There are none happening in Scotland or Wales. Now, different kinds of councils have different responsibilities. They look after services, including bin collections, the upkeep of parks, public housing, and they deal with local planning applications. If residents are unhappy with the quality of services or the amount of council tax they're being charged, that could determine which party controls the council. Now, sometimes local elections can give an insight into how voters are feeling about the Westminster government. In 2019, the last round of these elections, Theresa May was Prime Minister and the Conservatives lost more than 1,300 seats. Labour, under Jeremy Corbyn, also dipped, losing 84. The Liberal Democrats were the big winners on the night, gaining 700 councillors and several councils. The Green Party and Independents also picked up lots of seats. Now, Rishi Sunak could call a general election next year. After huge turmoil in his party, he's hoping these elections will show that he's starting to turn things around. Sir Keir Starmer, well, he needs to demonstrate that Labour's lead in the opinion polls translates into gains at the ballot box. And after recent parliamentary by-election success, the Lib Dems are concentrating on traditionally Tory areas, and the Greens are hoping to win an outright majority on a council for the first time. Another significant change for voters in England: they'll have to bring photo ID to the polling station. That's already a requirement in Northern Ireland. This could be the biggest test of political opinion in England ahead of the next general election.
Vicky Young, our Deputy Political Editor, reporting there. Now, we're going to get a roundup of all the bank holiday sport, including the latest from the World Snooker Championships. It's hotting up. Jane Dougal is at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, Jane.
Good evening, Clive. In the last few minutes, there's been an exciting finish to the final of the World Snooker Championship. Belgian Luca Brecel winning it for the first time. He beat the four-time champion, England's Mark Selby. And before this tournament, Brecel hadn't won a single match at the Crucible. Joe Linsky was watching.
Belgium's Luca Brecel!
This year in snooker, the man to beat is Luca. Belgium's Luca Brecel could see this sport's finish line, 15-10 up in the World Championship final, but up against Mark Selby. He's won this title 4 times before, but Brecel's theme for the fortnight has been to take on the best. Before this year, he'd not been past the first round. Now, with century breaks and sensational shots, he was 2 frames from victory.
Has he got it? Of course he has.
But Selby knows how to come back.
Oh, look at this split.
Last year, he had a break from the game and took time out for his mental health. The man who made a 147 last night now stared down the deficit and won 5 frames in a row. The former champion was on the charge, but Brecel got a breakthrough. A miss brought a chance and Brecel won a crucial 17th frame. The path was clear to make this his year. Brecel's the first man from mainland Europe to win the title. History in Sheffield for this sport's new Belgian superstar. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
Congratulations to him. Football, and Leicester jumped 2 places out of the relegation zone with a draw at home to Everton. They had been 2-1 ahead, but Alex Iwobi rescued a point for Everton, equalising to make it 2-2. His side remains second from bottom of the Premier League. There was heartbreak for Arsenal women who went out of the Champions League after losing in the semi-finals to Wolfsburg at a sold-out Emirates. The record-breaking crowd of more than 60,000 watched 5 goals go in, but left disappointed after extra time, as our correspondent Katie Gornall reports.
They came in record numbers. This was the biggest ever crowd for a women's club match in England. Before a ball had been kicked, Arsenal had made history. Wolfsburg are no strangers to the big occasion, but early on Arsenal had them rattled.
Can she creep in, Blackstenius? Oh, yes she can!
Stina Blackstenius firing the Emirates to its feet. Eventually Wolfsburg cut through the noise, as Jill Roord once of Arsenal found space, then the target. Wolfsburg sensed a second, their captain Alex Popp duly delivered. Depleted by injuries, Arsenal would have to dig deep. Jem Beattie gave everything to keep the dream alive.
Drawing Arsenal level here.
Now 4-4 on aggregate, the tension in extra time was often unbearable. One mistake changed everything. With penalties looming, Paulina Bremer pounced to send Wolfsburg to the final. For Arsenal, it felt like the cruelest of blows. Well, with so many of their big players out injured, it was perhaps inevitable that Arsenal would come up short eventually. They've treated their fans to an epic here at the Emirates, but this will hurt. Now they have to pick themselves up and refocus on the WSL title race. Katie Gornall, BBC News in London.
And that's all the sport for now. Clive.
OK, Jane, thank you. Now, time for the weather. Ben Rich is here. Hi, Ben.
Hello, Clive. Thank you. A good evening. Bank holiday Monday did not feel the same everywhere. In Wales, it was the warmest day of the year so far. Very close to 20 degrees in Cardiff, 19.7 Celsius. But in Shetland, temperatures in most places did not get above 6 degrees Celsius, with some cold Arctic air digging down from the north. That cold air coming down behind what you can see here is a stripe of cloud on the earlier satellite picture. A very weak weather front, but that stripe of cloud is just going to envelop more areas of the UK as we head through the rest of the night. Could give a little bit of showery rain here and there, but to the north of it, that's where we're in the cold air, so temperatures in the Highlands could get down to -2 Celsius. And actually, broadly, it will be a relatively chilly night compared with some we've had recently. So tomorrow, this stripe of cloud in place, a few spots of rain and drizzle, but I think it'll be western parts, southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland, the West Midlands that see the best of any sunshine, albeit with a small chance of a shower. A lot of cloud further north and east, although the north of Scotland should see some sunshine. A little bit chilly though for these northern and eastern areas, but further west, western parts of Northern Ireland, for example, up to 18, maybe 19 degrees. Now, as we move into Wednesday, more cloud rolls across Northern Ireland and western Scotland with the odd spot of rain. Further south and east across England and Wales, some spells of sunshine. Still only 11 degrees there for Aberdeen, 16 for Cardiff, turning quite breezy in the south later in the day. And it will be quite breezy through Thursday as the isobars here squeeze together. Frontal system bringing some outbreaks of rain for the end of the week. And then for next weekend, the coronation weekend. Well, it's too early to be sure of the detail of the forecast, but there will be some rain at times. Clive.
OK, Ben, thank you. Ben Rich. That's it. Now, time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for all the news where you are. Have a very good night.